Hello, everybody. Again, this is Alex Nottingham, founder of All-Star Dental Academy, and we are in this webinar series, Hope in Crisis, three-part series, where we explore dental practice management, HR, and technological issues to navigate the COVID-19 crisis. In our first webinar, we were discussing HR and employment issues with Adrienne Twig. I want to thank her so much from Ben Erickson. Amazing webinar. We also had our VP of Coaching and our hiring director, Robin Reese, and Eric Vickery, one of our longstanding coaches, was helping as well in the chat. And in our last webinar, we built on our HR discussions. That was still a very popular question. And on allstardentalacademy.com, we have a lot of resources on HR and references of where you want to go. We have a location called allstardentalacademy.com/survival. We have some interviews that I did on when it comes to HR and these situations, as well as in our blog. I have the replay posted of my interview with Adrienne Twig. And as well as I'm mentioning, our second webinar, we were looking at practical practice management steps to help your business and employees not just get through the crisis, but how do we build towards recovery? And I had none other than our head instructor, Larry Gazzardo, with me, and that replay is posted as well. And actually, while I'm speaking and interrupting my rant, I want to go live on Facebook. So I'll get kind of that going. Go there. Okay, so Facebook is being moved along as well. So you can check those resources out. And in today's third and final webinar, we're going to explore those technological issues. And I was kind of referencing them in the other two webinars. And we are going to find some great resources. And I have the great honor, a dear, dear friend of mine, Dr. Lorne Lavine, and good person to know, the digital dentist, very, very well known. And he's our special guest today. And Dr. Lorne Lavine is the digital dentist. He founded his technological consulting firm in 2000. And by the way, he was a dentist in a previous life, a periodontist. His focus is providing comprehensive IT service that understands dentistry inside and out. Today, with clients all across North America, his team of talented IT professionals can solve your technological challenges and help you stay focused on your patients. Please welcome Dr. Lorne Lavine. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I hope everyone out there is staying safe and healthy, and thank you for joining, and hopefully I can answer whatever burning questions you have, and we're here for a while, so bring it on.
All right. So just tell me how things are going with you. How are you? You keeping safe? What's new on your end?
Yeah, well, things are going fine, actually. We're here in Southern California, so pretty much half the country, we're in close to lockdown phase. One of the main advantages for my business model is that my technicians have actually been working remotely for about 8 years now. So this is really no different for what we've always been doing over the last number of years. I've got my 13-year-old, he's out of school, so dealing with that. But from a business standpoint, we're busy. We've got I know we're going to get into this today, but we've got a lot of offices that are working remotely from home and need our help with that. A lot of people are taking advantage of this downtime to do the things that I've been on their case for the last 7 years. That their number one excuse was, we just don't have the time. Well, now they have the time, and without making light of the situation, I think one of the things that I have the most fear about is that only essential businesses are open here in SoCal right now. That does not include hair salons. And it's interesting, about 6 months ago, my 13-year-old son came to me and said, "Dad, can you please get me," it was like a barber's hairdressing kit with clippers and scissors, and he wanted like a mannequin head with a wig on it that he could practice cutting hair. I never understood why. He's had no inclination before or after to cut hair. Meanwhile, that may be my only option for the next few weeks. So, I mean, it's a scary thought having my 13-year-old cut my hair, but I may not have a whole lot of choices. Probably not something you worry about.
Yeah, and I don't have that problem.
Daily basis, Alex.
No, I don't have that problem. No, very, very nice and neat. And look, we've been getting a lot of questions that people have been asking about how to safely work remotely, train remotely, how to interact with the practice management software remotely, and how to do it safely, certainly. And so I wanted to not get into that. I wanted to wait for you because you're the expert on this stuff. So tell me a little bit about, I mean, so the overriding theme we're going to be aware of here there's two that, and I've done many interviews with you. My favorite to interview is HIPAA is one thing we'll hear a lot about, and the other is going to be protection from antivirus and malware and those things. So those all start to come into play in any of these things we start to engage with. So how do we effectively, just in general, start to train? So like my people who are training with Ulster Dental Academy, they want to, I mean, obviously they have a computer, they log in, they do that. But how does a team interact, like in terms of doing huddles or so let's start, I like to start methodically. So first step is, I have a team. I want to communicate with them. I want to discuss our training needs. I want to goal set with them. How do I interact with them? My team will start first, then we'll go to patients.
There's multiple ways of doing it. My team, we tend to use Skype on a day-to-day basis just because we are working remotely. We're not discussing any HIPAA sensitive material. There's no protected health information that's being discussed in this. We don't have to worry about it. We literally just got a notification from the Office of Civil Rights today. And I think this is important for people to understand that a number of government agencies, the stimulus bill just passed about an hour or so ago. The IRS is delaying payments, tax returns for 90 days. Here in California, we've got a 60-day break on that. But Office of Civil Rights sent out this memo that they're not on break, and you cannot use the word coronavirus or COVID-19 if you suffer any type of breach or there's been any violation of HIPAA law and expect to get away from it. And they just published these new Telehealth Regulations, which talks about the fact that if you're going to be using any type of video conferencing, either with patients or where patient information is discussed, it has to be done in a secure way. So they mentioned specific programs. Let me actually see if I can pull them up here.
Got it.
So they specifically talked about using ones that are okay to use for video conferencing would be Skype for Business, UpDocs, VC, Zoom for Healthcare. The ones that you specifically cannot use would be Facebook Live, Twitch, TikTok, Slack, or other ones that are similar to that.
Can you get me that as well? I'll put that in our survival kit, our resource library.
I'll get that to you.
Yeah. So there are certain things that there's certain softwares you can use that are protected.
It depends on the content of what you're discussing. Okay. If you're just having a video conference to talk about, the practice in general and HR type issues, things where there's not protected health information that's being discussed, then you can use really anything like a Skype, something like that is fine. If you're using something where patient information is being specific electronic protected health information, you have to use a secure system. One of the things that makes it secure is that whichever product you're using has to be willing to sign a business associates agreement with you. We call them a BAA. And this is something that offices have had to do for 10 years with HIPAA, with any of their vendors that have access to their information. Same thing with video conferencing, that they have to be willing to sign that BAA. Again,
okay, so if you're just training your team, again, my All-Star students wanted to know, if I'm training my team on All-Star training, we're not mentioning any patients, we're seeing how everybody's doing, we're talking about goals, strategies, whatever, that you can do anything you want.
Yeah, Skype, Zoom, anything, any one of those are perfectly fine.
Okay. And then if you are going to start discussing patients in the call, you need to use a platform that will be willing to sign a HIPAA a business agreement. What were some of them? You say there's a Zoom version that does that?
It's called Zoom for Healthcare. Most Zoom is free, the ones that most of us use. The only version of Zoom that will sign the BAA is Zoom for Healthcare. That's $25 a month.
Okay.
Called
And the
Docs.
BAA is a business associates agreement.
Correct.
And the same thing, Dr. Lavine was advised in our company as well. Since we do call grading, we've been upgrading our systems even further. And one of the things that you recommended is if you use Dropbox. Before it was Sukasa, that was one. But you mentioned if you're using Dropbox, that you want to use Dropbox for business. So pay attention here. This is another issue, is sharing data. So whether it's Google Drive or others, you have to have a version. We know that Dropbox Business has a version that they will sign a business associate agreement. They do have some of the HIPAA provisions, like where they're keeping a paper trail. I know I went a little tangent, but what are the other ones? I know Dropbox for Business. What are a few others that are compliant?
For file sharing?
For file sharing.
That's a good question. I mean, Dropbox for Business or using the Sukasa plugin is probably the one that 99% of our clients are using. Again, it's the same criteria. They have to be willing to sign the BAA. There's other things that you look for. For example, you have to do what's called auditing and logging. You have to be able to know, because there's protected health information in that folder or wherever it's residing, you need to be able to track, well, who accessed that information and when did they access it? What did they do with it? So you need to have that in place. It has to be encrypted, obviously. You have to have what's called auto log off. A lot of times people use services, and we'll get into this when we talk about remote desktop.
Sure.
Where you can't use a remote desktop software that just stays open all the time.
Right.
You're sitting at home, logging into your office, you walk away from your desk for a few hours, you can't have it open that your kids or your spouse can just go in and start looking at the stuff on there. There has to be some type of system set up so that it logs you out after a certain period of inactivity, say 15 minutes, 30 minutes, whatever the case may be. So you have to look for all those things. That's why, a Dropbox for Business, there's other ones out there, but you want to look for ones that are designed for healthcare, because most of the regular Dropbox and Google Drive, ones like that, they're not compliant.
Right, because I heard, so you mentioned Zoom for healthcare. Somebody said that there is a Skype for Business. There might be, and I think Google Suite said if you have the business class, right?
G Suite, correct.
G Suite.
Regular Google, no, but if you have G Suite, which is like $10 per user per month, then that, and again, we need to be careful about the term HIPAA compliant.
Okay.
HIPAA does not certify any specific hardware or software as being compliant. There's no such thing as a HIPAA compliant firewall or a HIPAA compliant software. The question is, does the software address certain HIPAA rules and regulations and allow you to achieve better compliance by using their software?
Gotcha.
Because
it's a now, is HIPAA a statute? Is it statutory?
It's a law.
It's law. And so there are elements that
are laws, but it's
okay. It shows there are elements you need to be kind of to. So when you're being audited or sued, there are certain elements they're going to look at. And we'll get to that later about the risk assessments and so on. Somebody had a question about, is FaceTime okay to do video consult a patient?
No, they specifically, just make sure I got that in here. The ones that OCR, well, they said Facebook Live, Twitch, TikTok, Slack, basically any, again, unless FaceTime is going to do a BAA with you, which they're not, unless it's encrypted, we don't recommend that. Because these initial regulations that I was just talking about are designed more for dentist to patient communication, or staff to patient communication, but it obviously covers a lot of different things as well. So I would not, I don't have anything specific from OCR that says you can't use FaceTime, but just knowing the way that it's set up, it's not something we would recommend.
And somebody has a question that if they're having a cash flow issue and their computers need to be upgraded, would that be okay if they didn't upgrade until don't have the revenues to do that mass upgrade? Would they be more lenient on that?
You can't spend what you don't have. One of the things that kept us very, very busy last year was the fact that Microsoft ended support for Windows 7 and for Server 2008 as of January 14th of 2020. So we literally had well over 1,000 computers that we had to replace or upgrade. HIPAA doesn't say you can't run this specific operating system. What they do say, and we'll get into this later, is that you must do a risk assessment, a formal risk assessment. And that risk assessment, it's not enough to just do the risk assessment. You have to then address whatever risks you find. One of those risks would be, hey, we're running an operating system that's no longer supported, it's no longer being patched. So if you want to work by the letter of the HIPAA law, you have to upgrade those systems. You should be running Windows 10. Are you at high risk right now with offices closed and with a lot of areas, half the country pretty much shut down? Probably not. But you have to take care. I mean, this is one of the themes that we've been seeing. I was concerned when we first started shutting down that, hey, a lot of offices are just going to start being concerned about cash flow and they're going to hold stuff off. That really hasn't been the case. We have so many clients who say, I've been putting this off for a year, 2 years. I know I need to do it. And yeah, I'm a little worried about the cash flow and what's coming in. But I know, having gone through some of the things, that it's, when we get back to normal, whatever that is, I think some areas of the country might be closer to a month, some closer to 2. At some point, you're going to be back to normal. It's be a flood. I mean, people are going to be jamming in there. You're not going to have time to deal with some of these things. This is a perfect time, in my opinion, to really handle those things that you've been blowing off for the last couple of years, because now you've got the time to do it and you can do it properly.
You know what's so interesting is, it's so funny, when we first met, we were like, we wanted to do a webinar and you're like, well, what do we have in common? It's like, you do online training and I do, HIPAA assessments and technology. I'm like, we have a lot in common, because it's very interesting. We see a very interesting trend too. I'm seeing an uptick in the amount of interest in training, and you would think that that wouldn't be the case. And I think you're right, that this is both what we're talking about are things that if you do it well now, you save a big problem later. What I was talking with Adrian Twigg on my end with training, when you train your team members well, they perform better and they stay longer, and you have less turnover. Turnover is extremely expensive. Okay, tens of thousands of dollars. Your stuff is, if you do it now, you're saving, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars, okay, depending on the size of your business, from a HIPAA violation and lawsuit and those things. So you're right. This is the ideal, a great time to be doing those things. Like you said in the very beginning, I'm too busy, because you're right. When you get back, you're going to be so busy in taking care of your employees, getting them up to speed. Your patients going to be a lot of demand and ramping up, that this is a good time to do those things. You're absolutely right. And it's so interesting how our companies are very intertwined with that.
And we've been talking about HIPAA, but really what's been driving things for the last year or so is cybersecurity. And, I feel horrible for the offices that went through this, but it was a real wake-up call for a lot of our clients. There were 400 dental offices in Wisconsin that were hit in August with the ransomware virus, another 100 or so that were hit in Colorado in late November, early December. That was a real wake-up call for a lot of our clients who realized, dental offices are under attack. The good news is that a lot of what we were doing for HIPAA crosses over into cybersecurity.
Let me get back to that, but there's an interesting point that was mentioned in the chat, and I was going to ask you about this too, and I think it's a good point to address. There is some. I think you were speaking about it. Notice from the OCR HHS that there is going to be some relaxing with respect to HIPAA rules, that if you act, and remember I said this from the very beginning for those who are watching my webinars, same thing with HR. If you act in good faith, that's a term of art in law, that and there's a non-compliance, okay, you won't be getting the penalties. So can you speak about this acting in good faith, that there is somewhat of a relaxing, they're saying, for telehealth?
Yeah, that's what we got as well with the telehealth. That's the notice that we got, and I'll get this to you so we can get it out to everybody. We'll have the list of people who attended, so I can get that out as well. Of course, the two key words there are good faith. Let's use an example. One of the things that HIPAA requires is what's called a risk assessment. We've talked about this briefly before. It's in the law. It's most HIPAA, and this included, tends to be very non-specific. I mean, if you look up the HIPAA regulations and you ask, how do I do a risk assessment? There's literally one sentence, you gotta do a risk assessment. There's no official guideline. However, the National Institute of Standards and Technology, NIST, they created a document, it's document 800-30. It's 100 pages. If you suffer from insomnia, it's going to cure that immediately because it's unbelievably dry. But the basic gist of it, which you would expect, is that you have to do a thorough risk assessment. You have to look at your IT systems. You have to look at things from an administrative standpoint, the physical protections in your office. That's why I get bothered sometimes when I see some of these companies out there who are telling people, hey, since HIPAA is non-specific, go online and take this 10, 15-minute questionnaire. You've done a risk assessment. When we do a risk assessment, it takes 5 to 7 hours. I mean, it has to be thorough and comprehensive to do it properly. Also, and this is kind of a pet peeve of mine, and I apologize about this. I see a lot of companies that for years were OSHA compliance, and now they're doing OSHA HIPAA. They really have nothing in common. I mean, it's like putting your dental office inside of a florist. I mean, there's no similarity. And if you think you've done a risk assessment, but you did not do a thorough evaluation of your IT systems, looking at, password policies and network shares and firewalls and all that stuff, then you haven't done a proper risk assessment. The reason I'm getting, was harping on that is that, when you see a patient, unless it's an emergency patient, pretty much all of you are doing the same thing. New patient comes in, you take medical and dental history, you take x-rays, you do your perio probing, restorative charting. With all of that data, you then go ahead and present a treatment plan to the patient and then start the treatment. You would never sit someone in the chair and just start treating them, again, unless it's an emergency, and even then you're still taking some data.
Wait, Lorne, help me, because I got this notice. I wasn't able to thoroughly read this. You got that. What is the provision? I want to make sure I read it correctly. It was sent March 20th. Did you get that one? The one it says, under the notice covered by healthcare, Google, Skype, to provide telehealth without the risk that OCR might seek to impose a penalty for noncompliance with HIPAA rules related to the good faith provision of telehealth during the COVID-19 nationwide. Providers are encouraged to notify patients that the third-party applications potentially introduce privacy risks, and providers should, etc.
That's what we're talking about. That's that notice.
And how do you interpret that? Because I need some time to read it.
Again, it goes back to good faith. I mean, we're talking about the risk assessments. Obviously a lot of people are worried about HIPAA violations, but if you haven't at the least looked to see where are we potentially not compliant, it's hard to argue that you've made a good faith effort to even do a risk assessment.
Okay.
If you're not, they've talked about, good faith, but you can't use a Facebook Live or, anything that's public facing, you're not supposed to use. Now, obviously, people aren't out in public in coffee shops or whatever, but there's a number of things that they would, that's always, the issue is good faith. Who's going to make that determination?
And the same good faith, we're talking about HR the other day, is employee manuals. If you have a manual and you follow the process and you get sued, you have systems you were acting in good faith. Have you been acting in good faith? Those all will be taken.
As I was saying, I'm not as worried about HIPAA violations right now as I am about cybersecurity.
Okay.
And there's so much crossover because all the things that HIPAA says you have to do as far as
so let's get into that, because
all that stuff. But you have to have that in place for HIPAA, and of course, it's protecting your office, which is the bigger concern right now.
So you already discussed the issue of just communication software with you're talking with patients. There were certain ones that you recommended. Fine. Now, this is the big one because I got hit with this. Luckily, I don't have any HIPAA issue on my computer, but I tried to remotely log into my computer with remote desktop protocol, and I'm pretty tech savvy, and I'm like, oh yeah, I know, I'm good at computers. I know Linux, all this stuff. And so I found a way to open my ports, and many of you know what I'm talking about, but you know what I'm talking about. And I was able to remotely log in using a remote desktop protocol, and it was great. It was awesome. And then I got hit with a, what do they call it? Ransom attack?
Ransomware,
Nasty,
yeah.
nasty. So what's happening? How do we do it safely? And what's going on with that?
I had mentioned earlier about those 400 offices in Wisconsin and 100 in Colorado. All of those were hit exactly the same way, which was through the remote access software that was being used by their IT provider. You know, the people who want to separate you from your patient data, you know, separate you from your money, they figured out, hey, you know, we could try to attack hundreds and thousands of dental offices, but what if we can break into the system of one dental IT provider and, you know, basically exponentially push out that ransomware to all of their clients? And they found a way to do that. So there's more or less two different ways that you can access your office remotely. There's what's called a VPN, and there's remote access. And each one has pros and cons. Let's talk about VPNs first, because that's the one that we get the most requests for. It's actually the one that we do the least.
Virtual private network.
Virtual private network. Now, there's two types of VPNs, and I want to make sure I clear this up. A lot of people may be familiar with what's called a VPN service. You would use that, and I'll just give you like an off-the-cuff example. Let's say you were traveling in the UK or Germany, whatever. You wanted to watch Netflix on your laptop. When you go to access Netflix, it would tell you, hey, you know, you can't access that program from where you are because they have licensing agreements in different countries. Now, I'm just using Netflix as an example. They've actually found a way around this, but you would use a VPN service in those specific instances that all your web requests, all your web traffic would get forwarded to a server in the US first and then go on to Netflix site. So Netflix wouldn't recognize that it's coming from your laptop in the UK, is recognizing it's coming from a server in the US, and you'll be able to see all the content. That's not what we're talking about here. A VPN, I think the best way I could describe it, imagine, you know, in your office, you have a central hub location where there's a switch, a router, a cable modem, and then going out, kind of like a hub and spoke type of deal, you have multiple computers in the office that are connected through a network cable, an Ethernet cable, to that central hub. You know, it's a very secure system. It's all wired, and maybe you've got a couple of wireless devices in there, but that's how it's set up. Imagine now that you could take an invisible wire and stretch it all the way from your office, all the way out to your house, where it could be a mile away, 5 miles away, 100 miles away, however it is. Now you've got what's called a virtual private network, that you are in essence creating an invisible cable, a secure connection from your home computer to the network. Your home computer becomes another computer as if it was part of the office network. So the reason that as IT people tend to like that is that it's very secure. It uses encryption. It's almost impossible to hack into that. So it's probably the most secure method out there. The other reason that people tend to sometimes like it, and we'll get into this when we talk about remote desktop, you don't need a separate computer at the office to connect to. It's that computer is just like any other computer in the office. It's like the operatory and front desk computers. Why is it something that we don't get a lot of call for, or a lot of our clients don't like? First off, they're not the easiest in the world to set up. Typically, you need a VPN router at both locations, at your home and the office. Now, there's some software that is a little bit easier to set up, like Hamachi, but typically people are using these VPN routers. The number one issue we deal with is lag. So when you're in your office, you have what's called a gigabit network, where it's running at 1,000 megabytes per second. When you're connecting from your house, it's going to be the slower of whatever your internet connection is at the office or your house. And a lot of times we're talking 25, 50 megabytes per second. So already your maximum speed is going to be 5% of what it would be within the office. Add on to that the fact that the VPN, because it uses encryption, that encryption has about 30 to 40% overhead over your network speed. So basically cut whatever your max speed is in half. Now you also have to deal with the fact that when you're in the office, you're accessing data on the server that's 20 feet away, 30 feet away. When you're at home, you're miles away. So there's a lag as well. The other concern with running a VPN is that you basically have to install the same software at home as you do at the office. So you have to install your practice management software, your image software. Some of them have licensing fees where they charge on a per computer basis. So for those reasons, even though I think it's a more secure solution, most of our clients prefer not to use a VPN. They prefer remote desktop. With remote desktop, and again, there's multiple systems out there, depends which one you use, and it can be relatively secure as well, depending on how you set up. The main advantage is ease of use. You basically install some software at the office, you install it at your home, and you use that to log on to another computer at your office. You're basically working on one of the office computers as if you were sitting right there. You use the mouse, you use your keyboard. It's no different than sitting right there. You can't physically touch it, but you're right in front of it. But of course, with everything, there are some downsides. As I said, it's not as secure. The main downside of using remote desktop is that you need another computer to access. No one can use that computer because it'd be no different than you sitting right there. Now, under the present circumstances where a lot of offices are either shut down or just seeing emergency patients, you probably have an extra computer that someone can use remotely. When it becomes an issue is more when we're back to full speed. A lot of offices have remote workers, an accountant, a bookkeeper, that you want to give them access to get onto a computer, and it has to be a dedicated computer for that remote person because you can't have two different people working on the same computer at the same time. So those are the basic differences between the two. I'd say probably 90 to 95% of the offices that we've set up in the past and that we're certainly setting up right now are opting for the remote desktop because it's easier to set up. A number of them are free, so there's really no, other than labor, which we'll talk about that, but we're happy to do this for free for anyone that's webinar. So
what are some people have been asking about Doxy? There's also LogMeIn, there's TeamViewer, VNC. Which ones do you like?
So we talked about the need that it still has to be HIPAA compliant, and you found out the hard way that's not just HIPAA, it's cybersecurity. There are certain ones that are not secure. The same criteria that we talked about with telehealth is the same here. There has to be the auditing and logging. It has to be encrypted. You have to have a BAA with them. The two that we typically recommend the most, one is TeamViewer. TeamViewer is free if you're doing one-to-one from a house to I mean, officially TeamViewer says you're not supposed to use it in any commercial environment. We've never had a problem installing TeamViewer if you're just connecting from one computer at your house to one computer at the office. If you do multiple, that's when it starts to get, then you'll need the paid version. Anything else that falls under the LogMeIn family, which is LogMeIn, go to mypc.com. Both of those, again, we don't say they are HIPAA certified, but if you actually go to the LogMeIn website, and if you do a Google search for LogMeIn HIPAA, they actually have a list of 15, 16 different HIPAA regulations that their software meets in order to, as being part of your HIPAA compliance. So, so those are the two, the TeamViewer, VNC, which we've used for a number of years for Office. We typically use it now for internal, once we're already in the network, but pure VNC does not meet the HIPAA requirements. We don't recommend that for offices right now, even though it can be easy to set up. The other reason that we don't normally recommend VNC, or probably whatever you use, like Windows has remote desktop built into it. Most servers, there was server operating systems have what's called RDS, Remote Desktop Services. Every one of those requires you to open up a port in your firewall in order for the traffic to get through. Go to my PC, log me in. TeamViewer do not require you to open up that port. We would never recommend.
Does VNC port uses a port?
VNC requires a port as well. Okay. Typically, port 5900, 5901 are the ports. The one that's built into Windows is port 3389.
Not doing that again. But you know what's interesting? If I use remote desktop internally, there's no problem in my own network. It's when I open ports externally, you can get into trouble if you don't have the proper protection and antivirus and
yeah. Now again, there's a lot of things. Like you said, you have to have antivirus software. You have to ransomware. We can talk about all those things, but the number one goal is to prevent anybody from even getting into your network. Then you have to say, okay, if they do get through, what protections do we have in place, such as a firewall?
So let me just throw some quick questions, and because I'm getting a lot of questions, just give me quick answers so we can keep moving on, because I think a lot of them mentioned.
My best to answer, as many as I can.
Yeah. So if a port is not opened, you're more secure if more ports are closed?
Absolutely. That's one of the ways. I actually just got I can probably send this out to people as well. If you go to Ars Technica, it's ARS Technica, there's it came out on the 25th. It's a long article, New Attack on Home Routers Send Users to Spoof Sites That Push Malware.
You know what, Lauren, can you send everybody, because I'm going to send the registrations to Dr. Lavine. He'll email a lot of these resources to you, because we have like a lot.
Talking about all the links, I will, what I got from OCR, thing about the routers, I will send that out. But absolutely, people are attacking routers now. So, you absolutely want to close off as many ports as you possibly can have. Some like port 80, which you use for web traffic.
And that's what happened to me, because obviously my port was open and something outside attacked my computer and got through.
Way to get through. Now, there's other ways if you have.
And for those who don't know what ransomware is, it's really bad, because like when you have viruses, you can kind of like use your Kaspersky, whatever, it'll get them. But once it encrypts your files and says, I'm only going to open them up for you if you pay money. And you can't do anything with your files.
It's horrible. So
now, if you had a backup, which of course, Dr. Lavine talks all about that. So,
well, let me qualify that though, because up until August, until we had those 400 offices that were hit, I was always telling people, your backup is your get out of jail free card, because the backups that we do for our clients are encrypted. We had never seen a ransomware hit an encrypted backup. That changed in August. We had one client that had been a former client of the IT company that was hit in Wisconsin. We didn't know they still had the software on there. They were hit. And we went to go to the backup. The backup had been hit. Now, we do online cloud backup for all of our clients as well. And the way that our backup is set up, the local backup won't run if there's a problem, if they find that the files are encrypted or corrupted in any way. So we can, so it doesn't transfer to the cloud, so we were able to restore from that. So you absolutely have to have some type of cloud backup, but it's not necessarily true any longer to say having a backup is going to save you, unless that backup also includes some type of off-site backup. But ransomware is nasty, and the ones that we were seeing recently, they're doing two things that are different. Number one, they're not just using one ransomware on one set of files, they're doing multiple. In other words, you have to pay 10, 15, 20 different ransomware requests to get all your files unlocked. The other thing that some of them are doing is saying, because I know people have backups, they're saying, you know what, you don't pay us the ransom, we don't care if you have a backup or not, don't pay us, we're gonna put your patient data online. So they're really ransoming you. So they're getting much more nasty when it comes to these types of attacks. So
and for everybody giving me different, there's a bunch of different remote desktop softwares. The bottom line is the big thing is a BAA. If you can get a BAA from them, that's a big check on the HIPAA checklist that you want to be able to get.
Right.
And there are other elements as well.
BAA, logging and auditing, so that you can track who accessed it. Good. Auto shut off, and encryption. If they have all four of those bases covered, you're pretty, and that, to my mind, would satisfy the good faith term that we've been using. You've made a good faith that you did your homework. You found that this software seems to meet all.
And another term of art is the reasonable person standard. So what would a reasonable dentist, or even the standard of care in the industry, and like he's saying, those 4 elements is what a reasonable dentist would be doing. And if you don't, you can always do more. You can always be OCD and go above and beyond, but at least as long as you hit that standard, you're in there. You don't want to be below that. Can you repeat a little slower the 4 major criteria that you recommend? BAA, Business Associate Agreement.
Business Agreement, encryption.
Auto log off, auto shut off.
And auditing/logging. Tracking
who's in what when.
Okay, right, who did what when.
I like that. Okay. Somebody asked about SMS, I guess text messaging patients.
Again, it just depends on, it's no different than when your practices are at full speed and you text or email a patient. You don't say, Mrs. Jones, we're looking forward to seeing you. Please make sure you take your pre-medication, for your heart murmur, because we need this for your implant case. It's coming up at 2:00. It's least amount of information possible. It's okay to say, Mrs. Jones, we're looking forward to seeing you at your appointment. You don't want to have any personally identifiable information in there as far as what medications they're taking, what procedure you're doing. So again, if you're not putting anything in there specific to their care, I think you're fine. But beyond that, I wouldn't use regular SMS text messaging.
One of the things we wanted to talk about is the risk assessment. So people are asking about the risk assessment. Who do you recommend? Well, I'll tell you who I recommend. I recommend Dr. Lorne Lavine, and and I get no benefit from that. I mean, besides I like you a lot, we're good friends, but I've utilized, even though he focuses on dentistry, I've utilized his wisdom for my own situation because, like I said, I thought I knew it all. I know just as much as he does. I was because I actually went to school for IT stuff and MIS, Management Information Systems. Like I know, and then I got hit because I was being a little cavalier. So I said, what do I do? What do I do? So now, I got to be very careful, extra careful. So you do risk assessments, correct? That's one of the things that you do.
We've been doing it for 9 years, actually.
Okay.
So,
what is a risk assessment? Why should you get it done? And what's included?
Okay. So a risk assessment is a thorough evaluation of every aspect of the practice that may be at risk of compromising the security and protection of patient information. Typically, that covers 3 main areas. Administrative. Do you have a policies and procedure manual? Do you have, incident reports? Do you have all the paperwork that you need? Are you documenting everything that you're doing? That's actually half the HIPAA rules are administrative. Secondarily would be physical. Are the charts locked up at night? Do you hopefully not take them in your car or at home? Do you have alarms on the door? Is there some type of video surveillance system or, whatever, all these questions related to physical. And then the one that obviously is a major concern for us is a technical evaluation. And that is everything. We do what's called an external vulnerability scan, where we literally, try to hack in through that router to see are there open ports? Can we get in? We look at things like password policies, screensavers, encryption. Are you using a regular Gmail or a regular Dropbox? I mean, it's a very thorough process. The beauty of doing the risk assessment the way that we do it is that we don't have to physically be in the office. The physical part of it is a questionnaire that we can actually walk the office through that part. Okay, hey, do you have an alarm system? Tell me about where your charts are. And they can fill that stuff out and we can help them with that. Everything else can be done remotely as far as the technical aspect of it. But if it's done properly, it should take minimum 5 to 7 hours when we do. Now, I should qualify that. It doesn't take 5 to 7 hours with your team or with anyone there in the office. That part usually, the questionnaire takes us maybe 20, 30 minutes. Everything else is done remotely, but it does take us quite a bit of time to install software on every computer and run the tests. when you do a proper risk assessment, and this, to me, this is the more critical thing, it should generate what's called a Hipaa management plan, their version of a treatment plan. It's not enough to just look and see where you're at, at risk. You have to then have a plan of action of how you're going to deal with it. When we've had a number of offices that have gone through Hipaa audits, they ask for the risk assessment first, but honestly, what they're more focused on is that Hipaa management plan. There was a case a few years ago, a company called CardioNet. They had done a risk assessment. They had just a draft version of their Hipaa management plan. They ended up settling for $2.5 million. And Hipaa takes this stuff very seriously. Because of that, and because we know, and we always tell people, when we do a risk assessment, when we try to get an office HIPAA compliant, we can't get you 100% compliant. Anyone that's saying that they guarantee you'll pass the HIPAA audit is lying to you, basically. I mean, you can't do, there's 700 pages of rules and regulations. What they want to see is that good faith effort. You can't prevent all breaches. So when we do a risk assessment and a HIPAA management plan for our clients, we also bundle in $500,000 of cyber liability insurance. Because if you are hit with a ransomware, a breach of some sort, unlike a lot of HIPAA, which is somewhat ambiguous, breach notification is not. They're very clear that if you suffered a breach, you have to notify all your patients in writing, you have to notify the local news media, you have to be listed on the Health and Human Services website. It's called the Wall of Shame. It's not a place you want to be. You're going to have legal fees. You're going to have fines and penalties. It's considered standard of care to provide some type of credit monitoring for those people. So you're going to need that insurance. So that's why we always bundle it in, because we don't really think it's optional. There's no HIPAA law that says you have to have insurance. There is a HIPAA law that says that you must do a risk assessment. Now, one of the questions we get from people, as I said, we talked about this NIST document. NIST really only applies to federal institutions. So we've heard some speakers out there say, well, if you're a private dental office, you don't have to worry about it. The fact is that it really is the only document, it's the only gold standard that HIPAA auditors use. So that doesn't really make a difference that if you're a federal institution or not. That's what they're using as their guideline for how you should have done a risk assessment. And I can tell you just from firsthand experience, if you say, well, we did it at a lunch and learn and we don't have any documentation of that, or, we went online and did this thing for 15 minutes, that's not going to cut it. I know that from personal experience. So, do it, do a proper risk assessment.
How often should you get this done, the risk assessment?
What they say is that it should be done on a regular basis. And there's obviously debate out there about what qualifies as regular. We do it minimum once a year when we do the risk assessment service for our clients, because that includes the HIPAA management plan and the policies and procedure manual and the insurance. We also offer to do it on a quarterly basis. Most of our clients are happy to do it once or twice a year. They're fine with that. You can make the argument, hey, nothing's changed in our office. Same staff, same hardware, same software. You could probably make the argument to do it every 2 years. The one qualification I would make, and this is really big, if a patient doesn't follow through with the treatment plan, they haven't done the treatment. That's the worst that happens. Let's say you do a risk assessment, you have a management plan in place, and you don't do anything about it. That potentially can be a lot worse, because when the HIPAA final rules came out, the omnibus rules in 2013, they classified 4 different levels of fines. And the lowest, which are only, and I use only, in quotations, only 25 to 50,000, those are for violations that you probably didn't know about and realistically shouldn't have known about. The highest ones, and those are the ones you hear about in the news, are for what's called willful neglect, meaning you knew about these problems and you chose not to do anything about it. That's when you have the major fines and penalties. So the one qualification I would say is, listen, you have to do a risk assessment. It's absolutely a HIPAA law. You also need to be prepared for the fact that you're going to have stuff that you need to do based on what that risk assessment finds. For most of our clients, you're looking at somewhere 5 to 10 hours of labor for us to tighten up all the things that we find in there. Now, in the past, it was a little more of a challenge. We had to do it after hours. Because offices didn't want to do it. They didn't want to not have patients to be seen. Now people have time. We can crank it out in a day. So, there's no reason
to take advantage of this opportunity.
There's no reason not to follow through and actually complete the items on there. What they're looking for, if you ever get audited, they don't expect the HIPAA management plan is going to be completed on day one. What they do expect is that you've at least made, there's those words again, a good faith effort to start addressing some things on there. A completely untouched HIPAA management plan is going to go downhill very quickly for your practice if you get audited.
Excellent. That makes sense. Somebody's asking about breach coverage insurance.
So there's different types of insurance out there. The one that we do, because there is breach insurance, we felt that we wanted something a little more comprehensive for our clients. So it's called cyber liability. Cyber liability would include breach in that. Breach would not, for example, cover you if you got hit with a ransomware virus and you lost income because of that. A cyber liability policy would cover you if you got hit with a ransomware and you had downtime or you had to pay the ransom. The insurance would cover that portion of it. Now, almost all of them have some type of deductible. It might be 500, 1,000, whatever the policy. I can't remember specifically what ours is, but it's to really protect you in case you get hit with something major. It's something we should point out as well. A lot of people don't know this. When you're hit with a ransomware virus, according to Health and Human Services, they released this in 2016, I believe, you've suffered a breach. Most of us don't think of breaches in those terms. We think of a breach as someone hacked into your network or you lost a laptop or an external hard drive. The way that Health and Human Services defines a breach is loss of control of your data, which is exactly what a ransomware does. So if you are hit with a ransomware virus, by definition, you've suffered a breach and have to notify those patients and the local news and all the things we talked about. So whether people are actually doing that, it's hard to say. I would imagine a good chunk of those 400 offices in Wisconsin probably did not declare a breach. Maybe they didn't know they had to, but the law is pretty clear on that point.
So I'd like to, I'm putting in the chat the link to the survival kit. And I also want to thank the Academy of General Dentistry. They were so gracious. They forwarded this resource to all their members. They've been very proactive about that. The reason I'm putting that out, if you scroll down a little bit, there's a link to Dr. Lorne Lavine's website, and there's a link to do that free. I want to talk about the free security audit. So certainly the risk assessment is what you kind of need, and then the HIPAA plan and so on. Now's a great time. I totally agree with that. Tell us because I appreciate generosity of providing our listeners for this, is the security audit. What is that? You're providing it free. What does it include? And like I said, I put the link to be able to access it.
Right. So I wanted to differentiate between the risk assessment and the security audit. Yeah. We've typically in the past always charged for our security audits. We are waiving that for anybody that's on the call, anyone that registered for the webinar. I'll send that out, the information to people afterwards as well.
Excellent.
A security audit is designed to be that, that 30,000 foot view down on where your practice is at. We look at everything on a not in-depth level, but just to look all the main areas. So we know that there's probably 8 to 10 areas based on our experience and clients that have gone through audits, that these are the areas where the HIPAA auditors are looking for. So if you have those things in place, you're going to be in much better shape. So the things that we look at is, so some things we can look at on our own. So the security audit, it would involve us logging into your office network. Of course, you can watch what we're doing. We just get data. What operating system are you running on the server and the workstations? How many computers do you have? There's certain things that we can't really see remotely. How are you backing up your data and how often? How are you emailing patient information to referring offices? When's the last time you did a risk assessment? But we can look at what antivirus software you have, what ransomware software you have, what type of firewall is in place, whether you've done any type of staff training. So that process normally only takes about 20 to 30 minutes. We need maybe 10 minutes with an office staff member, with the dentist, just to, to answer those questions for us, but it's not designed to be a long process. It is designed to very quickly and easily tell you, this is where you're at as far as the major HIPAA violations that we're seeing out there. And so once we've done that process, we would then schedule a call again with, I prefer to do it with whoever's going to be making the decisions, whether it's an office manager, dentist. A lot of times we do both, or with staff as well, where we can go over our findings. Here's what we found. You haven't done a risk assessment ever, or it's been 4 years, or it's not really adequate. Your backup doesn't meet HIPAA requirements. It's not encrypted. It's not secure. You're not testing and verifying it. These are all the things that we found, and here's all the ways that you can get yourself more compliant. Now, in almost all cases, it involves some type of labor, some type of ongoing services. This is the way that IT is nowadays. A lot of us are getting away from the older, we call it a break-fix model, where we're waiting for things to happen before we start fixing them. And we still do that. We still have hundreds of clients that we do those services for. What we're trying to do now is to be a lot more proactive, where we can monitor networks in real time. And if there's a major problem, be aware of it really quickly. We can be testing and verifying things on that regular basis. So the security audit is designed to give you a really good idea right now where you're at. Now, of course, we would be thrilled to work with offices to help them with their risk assessments. And by the way, that's the number one thing. And when we do a security audit, the number one thing that we find is that they haven't done a proper risk assessment. That's almost always the first thing that we're going to recommend. Like I said, you can't know what other problems exist unless you
without
look.
a risk assessment. Yeah,
and you have to know. So you have to do the risk assessment first. We do have, a number of clients that we work with that have their own IT people that maybe aren't up on HIPAA as much.
So it sounds to me like, the security audit, which you used to, charge for, and I know you're making free now, which is nice. It's kind of a way to engage, you all should know digital dentist by now, but to engage as a consultation, find some really good things there and get an overall big picture. But for you to actually sink your teeth into official land, because the security audit does not suffice for evidence of you're working your due diligence. In other words, you're doing your due diligence, but it's starting the process. The risk assessment is something you physically need to have on a reasonable basis to begin your compliancy endeavors with HIPAA. And then from that, you make the recommendations, and you start to put together a protocol to protect your data, to protect the patient information, and so on. So it's a good step. Now, I'm getting some questions about pricing. Do you want to go over pricing, or is that kind of something that's more of something you work with different?
No, there's a lot of my type of IT business that we run is called an MSP, a managed service provider. And it's a fancy way of basically saying automation. That, as I said, we try to get away from waiting for problems to happen. We want to be more proactive and stay on top of it and manage it all remotely. So, most MSPs have these different types of systems of how they charge. And a lot of times it's on a per device basis. Depending on how big your office is, how many workstations you have, you pay more. I never felt that was really fair. Just because it takes us pretty much the same amount of work. We're monitoring, and we have to step in, we step in. It doesn't really change what we have to do. It doesn't really change our costs for the software. So we talked about the security audit. That's free. I'm going to make another free offer, which is relating back to what we were talking about. If you desire any type of help to set up remote desktop from your home to your office, call my office up. Again, I'll send out this information to people on how to get in touch with us. We are more than happy to do that at no cost for you. If you are not a client of ours, we're not going to charge you. If you are an existing client of ours, I know some of the people on are, we're not going to take that out of your support time that you have with us. we're happy to help offices do it. It doesn't honestly take that long. I mean, you have to physically go into the office to install the software, which takes 5 minutes, then go home, and we'll help you set it up at both locations. But 10, 15 minutes, we can easily get it set up for you and make sure it's secure as well. So that's free as well. The risk assessment, if you include the risk assessment, the 5 to 7 hours it takes for us to do that, the HIPAA management plan, which takes me about 2 or 3 hours to put together, the $500,000 of breach insurance. We also provide with that a policy and procedure manual. Most policy and procedure manuals they're a dime a dozen. I mean, you can get them from the ADA. The one from the ADA actually isn't that good because it's a template. People don't realize when they buy it that there's actually a lot of blank lines in there that you have to fill out. So we do a customized manual. That's honestly not, you have to have the law says you have to have it, but auditors typically want to see what you got and that they don't go through it page by page. If you were to do all of that, it's $199 a month. It's a 12-month commitment. We have a lot of upfront costs for that. We have some people that would prefer just to get it over with and pay for that, upfront. We normally give a 5% discount for prepayment. In these times, for the next couple of months, we're offering a 15% discount.
Oh, wonderful.
If you want to prepay upfront for the whole thing. As I mentioned, if we do the risk assessment, we are going to develop a management plan that's going to have a certain amount of labor on there. For most offices, we're averaging 5 to 10 hours for that. We charge $150 an hour for labor. We would have a much better idea once we've done the risk assessment, what you're looking at. We are typically, again, in these times, we're capping it at 10 hours. Even if we need more time than that, we're not going to go above that. Other services, it just depends on what you get. Most of our backup clients are spending somewhere around $100 to $150 a month. Now, yes, there are cheaper systems out there. There's Carbonite, there's Mozy, there's ones like that. But again, you've got to follow HIPAA regulations. HIPAA says you have to test and verify the backup on a regular basis.
So, I mean, essentially, it's like you're renting an IT company that's, an IT position in your office, and it seems very affordable, a few $100s a month to get a lot of these things done.
If someone were to I'll give you worst case scenario. Let's say someone said, I know I haven't done enough to get HIPAA compliant. I want to do everything I possibly can within reason. Again,
right.
You can't get 100% compliant, but if you wanted to do the risk assessment and the management plan and get the insurance and have a backup, another thing that HIPAA says you have to do is called patch management. You have to keep your systems up to date. You have to encrypt everything. You have to encrypt your email communications. You have to have a firewall, antivirus software, ransomware protection. You have to do staff training. And of course, you're going to need support. You're going to need IT support. We have a package that if someone wanted to do all of that with unlimited support, the worst case scenario is $899 a month. $900 a month will get you everything. We do have a number of clients. I'd say probably half of our clients are on that suite. The other half might have a mix of services. They started off with the risk assessment. They know there's things they need to get. But again, the number one thing that we've heard from clients over the last few years about why they haven't proceeded with our recommendations is time. And they've got the time now. So
it sounds to me, look, from what I hear, just to kind of simplify, number one, I mean, the security audit is great. And that's amazing. I'm so appreciative. You didn't even tell me about this. I'm going to have to ask you if I can put that on the website. That's a really nice thing is so Dr. Lavine is going to also help you a lot of questions about how do I set up remote desktop and those things. His team is going to help you with that for free. Now, there are a lot of services here, anywhere from a few hundred to plus whatever a month. But for those that are listening, the number one thing, because the thing that takes the most time, I would gather, is the risk assessment and of getting things set up. Now's the time to do it, and it's a very reasonable investment because you got to do it anyway. I mean, you don't want to get another. We were talking about this earlier. You don't want that insult to injury. Once that's set up, then you have something you can go from there. Because there was somebody in here who was saying, what about money? Because money is difficult for some, right? Some people were commenting about the CARES Act that's coming out, or I don't know if it was passed yet, but the idea of there's a lot of, there's SPA, there's a lot of support to be able to potentially make investments or put the business on pause. But the idea is, and we're talking about this with Adrian in the HR realm, everything in writing. You want to make sure you're doing due diligence and you have a strategy. Risk assessment, number one. I wouldn't even worry about too much other stuff. Get that done, because then you can then say in your own internal documentation, I've done the risk assessment, which is something that's required. And this is my protocol. I'm going to begin, this is my plan. I'm going to begin starting with this. My goal is to get to that, but due to cash flow situation, I'm choosing to begin here. So if you get, and correct me if I'm wrong here, this is my legal mind thinking. If an auditor comes in and sees that this business was, didn't have the money and was making the risk assessment is making these steps, was like kind of a, some people come for treatment. This is, I can't do the entire mouth, but I can do it in steps. That I would think that the auditor would be a little more lenient, that they're at least making good faith steps.
That's our interpretation. But again, trying to not beat a dead horse here, the things that you do to manage your HIPAA compliance are conversely protecting you from a cybersecurity standpoint. And that, in my mind, is a significantly bigger threat to practices right now. When we do the risk assessment, we're going to know that you don't have a good firewall in place and you don't have good ransomware. We're actually going to find that in the security audit. We'll know that you don't have good ransomware and firewall and all that stuff in place. So you have to protect yourself. And listen, we're hearing this every day from people saying, listen, I know I need to do this stuff. I'm concerned about cash flow. And I know it's not a true analogy, because we're talking about a deadly disease here. But I think back to when I started my practice and I got out of school like a lot of people. I had significant debt coming out of school. I was a periodontist. I wanted to start my own practice. I had construction loans. I had equipment loans. I hired staff. I opened my doors, and it wasn't like I had a full schedule of patients the first day. It took me the better part of 6
I like
to
that
9
analogy.
months.
Yeah.
Or I was even making a profit, and I got by. I mean, yeah, I ate a lot of cereal for a few months, but this is going to be a lot shorter than that. And again, I'm not comparing starting a practice to dealing with a deadly virus, but most dentists, have the ability to get through this. Now, the CARES Act will help as long as you keep your employees employed. That's the thing for the Small Business Association, is that you can get up to 8 weeks of payroll with the proviso that you keep people at 80% or
capacity,
more of their current hours. So you can't let them go and then hire them back. It won't cover it. The other concern with the CARES Act is that it's probably going to take the better part of 3 weeks, I think, before they start giving out those loans. So it just got passed today, but we've been hearing from the SBA that about a 3-week lag before those start.
And that was a question somebody was asking about the CARES Act. For those that also wanted to forgot the company, Dr. Lavine. I mean, you can look him up, Lorne Lavine, but it's the digital dentist, very catchy. That's where you can find him. And what was it that? What was occurring to me is that we still have to think like business people. I know this is very difficult for dentists, right? Because you're all not taught that way. I know you had to make a big shifts as well when you transitioned from dentistry to IT. Is that this is very much like an investment, but it's something you do. Like, you have to buy practice management software. You have to have certain maintenance on your equipment. You got to have your IT department in your business running effectively. And I know you, and I was so grateful I know you do a lot of instruction for us and webinars, and even do some HIPAA training for us, for our students, is you mentioned that alongside practice management software, you should be doing practice management training with your team, phone skills, scheduling, because that's what generates money. So these are all things what I teach, and I have an MBA program, well, not technical, but I call it the All-Star Dental MBA. But the idea is to have you start thinking like CEOs. You say, okay, I don't have the money, but I have to think in the future. CEOs think in the future. And I will tell you this, and this is why we called this hope in crisis. We have to have hope, and that, yes, we're putting things on pause, but when we come back, there'll be pent demand, and we want to grow from this, and we want to get better. We want to be able to prepare for contingencies, and that these are things we want to make investments for the future. so that we can, whatever, look, I don't think any of us predicted this. I know for us in South Florida, we are prepared for hurricanes. We know the drill, we do things. We will going forward, I'll tell you this, all of us will start to include pandemics as part of our contingency plan going forward, because these can happen. But you got to think in terms of business, is that I'm making these investments in my business because I want to, the long-term effect of getting a ransomware attack, which was really annoying. It was terrible. And I'm lucky I didn't have any, PHI. They didn't get they got some of my backups. They did get into some of my local backups, but thankfully I had another port they didn't get to. But that's scary stuff. And it's and that could just shut your office down. This, I'll tell you, this coronavirus situation is, I don't know. I mean, if you get your office gets breached and you don't have backups, you have to notify all your people, all your patients, and you can't run your office. That to me as a business person would be even more difficult than from a business perspective, putting my business on pause, putting the health situation aside, which is something we all want to make sure we're safe and we're home. But we're trying to give you the tools to be safe as well as your business. So physically, you got to be safe. But I'm so happy to have you, Dr. Lavine, because you're finding ways to keep our business safe, okay, in these situations, and finding ways. And again, just to summarize, we have the free security audit. Dr. Lavine, the digital dentist, will help you set up your remote access, which is a big question. A lot of people want to know, how do I access the computers remotely? He will help you. That absolutely free, wonderful. Please do the risk assessment. And at the end of the day, this is a company you're going to want on speed dial. You're going to want to have, because when things come up, it's better to talk to him before things happen. But if anything goes wrong in your IT, whatever, this is a great resource. And he's so generous with his time and so many free webinars, education. I said before, and I really mean it. You're a gift to dentistry. I'm so grateful for you. And thank you for coming on.
Well, thank you for having me. And, I hope everyone stays healthy, safe. We are going to get through this. Apparently some areas of the country are going to get through it quicker than others, but we will get through this. And I have zero doubt that when we are, you're all going to be very, very busy, flooded with patients. Do what a lot of our clients are doing now, which is use this time to really get your infrastructure in place, do staff training, do all the things that you've been putting off for so long. You've got a golden opportunity to get this stuff handled, to protect your practice, your patient. I mean, there's nothing more valuable in my mind in a dentist's life than their data. That patient information is, and of course, the people trying to steal it from you are also aware that there's nothing more valuable than that. But we will get through this together. Alex will send me the list of everyone that was on here. I'll make sure you get the links to our website so that you know how to get a hold of us, to call us up, to get our help with the security audits and helping set up remote access. And we're here to help. We're at full speed. I know a lot of businesses are suffering. We've got our full team here. They're taking calls. It's business as usual here because we've got a lot of people that need some help right now, and we're happy to do anything we can to help people through these tough times.
I have some people saying, thank you, great webinar all 3 days. We're so, yes, thank you. And thank you for all the great experts that have agreed to put this on. And thank you for Dr. Lorne Lavine, not just coming, but he was promoting really heavily on social media and all of his channels to help take care and get all these speakers here for you. And, this all reminds me of the quote by Ben Franklin that said, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. So this, something to think in mind is using this time to think about where are things in my practice that I can improve on. As Tony Robbins always says, continuous and never-ending improvement. So I'll leave you with that, everybody. Thank you, Dr. Lorne Lavine, digital dentist. Thank you, everybody, all these all-stars here. And until we meet again, go out there and be an all-star.